You're listening to the Narrow Way Podcast.
You're listening to the Narrow Way Podcast, episode 18 and a half today, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for clicking in. We're talking about the hot topic of the tax cuts. That's the Christmas present that the Trump White House decided to give to us little people here in America, and we thank him for that very much. It's lots of confusing things thrown at you all at once, but suffice it to say, for the most part, it's not going to affect you come April 15th, 2018. April 15th, 2019 will be a different story, but as of right now, everything stays on par, on course, on track, as per usual. But in 2019, we have something to look forward to, and it starts no later than February of 2018. That's when the tax cuts will start affecting the withdrawal amounts or withholding amounts in your paycheck. So very, very exciting, but it can be confusing because of a couple different things, and that's why I chose to talk about it today and form this episode 18 and a half. No theology today, just purely politics, because I love politics so much. Big, important stuff. Good for the middle class, good for the working class. For the rich people, not so much. It's not necessarily bad for them. I don't think there are going to be very many people that are going to be paying more in tax, but there will be a few people that'll pay more. But it certainly counteracts the bad, all the good that's being done, because there's going to be a lot of good done, let me tell you. Now, the personal side of the income tax cuts will be taken out, and they will revert back to 2017 levels in the year 2028. And I'm assuming that's when Chief Flapping Gums Warren, Elizabeth Warren, will be in the White House. So we're going to have a real fight on our hands come 2028. So just be prepared for that. Be aware. Throw a little money in a jar and bury it in the backyard, because you're going to need it come 2028. But as of right now, in 2017, just so people understand, because what Trump did was he eliminated a lot of the standard deductions, or not standard deductions, but a lot of the tax write-offs, exemptions. He eliminated a lot of those, but he nearly doubled the standard deduction. It went from something like $6,750 per person to $12,000 for a single person. So, to put this in perspective, in 2017, let's say you work at Chick-fil-A, because you're probably a college student who has a degree in musical, archaeological, butterfly studies, and you can't find a job, surprise, surprise. And you've got a whole bunch of student debt, and you're living in your parents' basement, and you're 27 years old, and you're working at Chick-fil-A making $18,000 a year, because that roughly equates out to $9 an hour at $40 a week, 50 weeks in a year, because you have to take the 2 weeks off for your alma mater and go back to that for the alumni parties. Right now, in 2017, you're going to be taxed at 15%, and you're going to have a $6,350 standard deduction. You're going to end up paying $355 in income tax. That's 2017. In 2018, under the new Trump tax cut, you're making the same amount at $9 an hour, 50 hours, 50 weeks out of the year. You're working 40 hours a week plus the alma mater vacation for the alumni party, but you're going to get taxed at 12% plus the $12,000 standard deduction for a single person. You know how much tax you're going to pay? About zero. How awesome is that? About $0 in income tax. That's what you're going to have to get, or that's what you're going to have to write a check out for to the IRS. I don't think they've ever seen a check that small from a single person. So you're saying that's great. The low income people are going to save about $350 a year. Yes, but it gets better. So they're worried about the $10,000 cap on the state and property tax level deduction. So if you have $12,000 worth of property tax and or state income tax, you're only going to be able to deduct the first $10,000, and that extra $2,000 you're not going to be able to deduct. But listen to this now. So for a $100,000 married annual income household, $100,000, that's fairly average, maybe a little above average, but as of right now, you're getting taxed 25%, and your standard deduction is $12,700. That means you're going to be paying $12,578 in income tax. That's a chunk. Most people making $100,000 in their family household do not have $12,578 laying around. That's a lot of money. Not to mention, if you don't have health insurance, and most $100,000 households do not have enough money to pay for $40,000 worth of health insurance in a year. So then you get dinged with the Obamacare mandate penalty. And that usually is somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000, depending on where you live, how much money you make, how many dependents you have, and so forth and so on. So that $12,500 goes up to $14,000 in income tax. Plus, you get to pay the $7,500 property tax, depending on where you live and what kind of house you have. Assuming you have, let's say, a $200,000 house, you're going to have to pay $7,500 in income tax, more or less. That adds up to a chunk. That's almost $20,000 in tax a year. Now, under the 2018 rule, the same scenario, you're getting taxed instead of 25%, you're getting taxed at 22%, and you can still take the $7,500 off for property tax because that's under the $10,000 cap. You're going to be paying, instead of $12,500, you're going to be paying $77.39 approximately for income tax. That is over $3,000 a year in savings in just the income tax alone. Plus, then you add the $7,500 in income tax, and then you're at, give or take about $15,200 for the year in total tax with no Obamacare mandate penalty. That's it. So you're paying $14,000 versus $20,000. That's $7,000 better, the average suburbia American household. Now you say, well, what happens if I have a whole bunch more? What happens if I have a little beach house that's worth $100,000 along with my $200,000 suburbia house? Or you have a farm that you're getting taxed a little bit more on, or you've got this, or you've got that. Well, in 2017, a $250,000 a year household, married, filing jointly, and you have a $300,000 house and you've got a $100,000 beach cottage, you are going to get taxed this year at 33%. And you've got, remember, that $12,700 standard deduction under Obama. That's $50,417 that you're paying in income tax. $50,000 right off the bat. Plus, you've got that $15,000 property tax, although you are able to deduct that entire $15,000 in the property tax that you're paying. You still have to pay the $50,000 plus 15, that's $65,000. And assuming you've got healthcare insurance, you're not going to have to pay any of that. But in 2018, under the Trump tax plan, you're making $250,000. You've still got the two houses with the beach cottage and all that. You're going to get taxed at not 33%. You're going to get taxed at 24% with a $24,000 standard deduction. Now you're paying, instead of $50,417, you're paying $41,819, even though you can only deduct $10,000 of the $15,000 property tax. So you see, it is still making sense. It's still making sense for people why this is so great. Trump, that I just gave you 3 examples, and they're tiny, and there's a lot of things that could be changed and go wrong and make it different. But the point is, Forbes ran a study on this new tax plan, and it says the average American is going to save in between 1.6 and 1.9% of their average income. That's just like getting a 1.6 to 1.9 raise in their after-tax income. So if you've got a job where you're making $50,000 a year, congratulations. You just made $5,000 extra this year or more. 1.5% average income boost, and that's on the low side. That's at $75,000. That's that's $1,125 a year. That's a big raise. What could you do with $1,000 extra every year that you're not working any harder for? You're not putting in any extra hours for. That's a big stinking deal. And we have Trump and the morons in Congress. I don't know if you need to send them a Christmas card or a thank you note, but you can anyway if you decide to. Now, that's all the personal side. Now, if you move over to the corporate tax cuts, and by the way, these do not expire. These are permanent. There is no expiration date on this. So if you think the 1.5 to 1.9% income tax or raise that you have after your taxable income at the end of the year, if you think that's really nifty, just wait, because you're going to be getting raises from your employers too. Why? Because instead of paying 35% corporate tax that these small businesses and big businesses are going to be paying in 2017, next year in 2018, they're going to be paying 21%. That is a 14% discount. That is massive. If you've got a business, or if you work for a business that makes $1 million a year, and you're saying, hey, by the way, you're going to get to keep 14% of your income more next year than you do this year. It is the lowest corporate tax rate since 1939. It's a massive, massive boost to the economy. People are bringing back their money that people like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett, they have sheltered their income and their money for their corporations and their businesses overseas, because a lot of countries that do not have USA on the title have lower tax rates for corporations than 35%. So they do the smart thing. They take their money and they take their business elsewhere, so they don't have to pay the 35%, because that is whopping and huge. So now they're going to bring back jobs. They're going to bring back their equipment. They're going to make more jobs here in America. So the unemployment rate is going to drop even further than it has already under the Trump administration. It's spectacular. I'm over the moon with this. I never dreamt that this was going to pass. I thought the wishy-washy limp wrists in Congress would make sure that this doesn't pass. But it did. And I've never been so happy to be so wrong in my entire life. Now, one other fancy, cool, and groovy thing that is on the corporate side of the income, or of the corporate tax cuts. When a company goes out and buys a new machine, let's say Coca-Cola, my personal favorite, goes out and buys a new bottling machine, and they spend $100,000 on this machine. Normally, they have to amortize that deduction and depreciate that over, let's say, 7 years. So in other words, they can't write off the $100,000 purchase of this bottling machine. They've got to spread it out over 7 years, or maybe it's 12 years or 15 years. It varies depending on what you buy and how much it costs. But in other words, they don't get the full tax relief right here, right now, if they so choose. Under the Trump administration and the Trump tax plan, they do. They get to take that in 1 year if they want. They get to write off that $100,000 bottling machine if they so choose in the year 2018. Why is that a good thing? Because if they can deduct on a $100,000 bottling machine right now, right today, this year, and don't have to amortize it over 7 or 15 or 20 or 5 or whatever, how many years it is, that means if it goes bad, or if there is a huge improvement in bottling machines, because I'm sure that's a growing, rapid, evolving industry. But if Coca-Cola decides after 3 years, hey, I don't want this machine, I want to upgrade and get the next best and greatest thing, the iPhone X for bottling machines. If they decide they want to do that, they can, and then they get another deduction. How cool and how groovy is that? Because, you see, under the Obamacare tax, or under the Obama tax brackets, you can't do that, because if they buy this bottling machine and they're deducting it and amortizing it over 7 years, they're not going to go out and buy a new machine for at least 7 years, because then they can't deduct and write off the rest of that. They can't get the rest of the tax income because they have it amortized over 7 or 10 or 15 years. Now they can, and that creates more industry, that creates more jobs, that creates more people going out and buying more things because of that much more tax relief. How awesome is that? People are still worried about the standard deduction, or not the standard deduction, about the state and local deduction. That is Trump's genius way of sticking it to the liberal politicians in the liberal states. I predict that very, very soon, because the 2018 elections are coming up, and there are a lot of Democrat senators and representatives that are up for re-election in states that Trump won all across the country. I predict very soon you will be hearing about people going out and campaigning against these Democrat senators in Democrat states with very high taxes and high income tax and high property tax. And you're going to hear the opponents of these Democrats saying, you know, you guys would get to take and partake in the tax cuts that we passed last year, but with the Democrat running things, he wants a lot more money for his state. But if you elect me, then you'll get to participate in the tax cut also, because we're going to take the state income tax and the state property tax way down. So you're going to get to enjoy that massive tax cut that got passed in Washington last year in 2017 at the end of the year. If that happens, and if they can capitalize on that, and I believe they're going to, it's just going to be a matter of time. If they can capitalize on that, not only are we going to have 51 seats in the Senate and a huge majority in the House of Representatives, but we're also going to take up back more governor's mansions. Not that we need any more. I think we've got 39 out of 50 right now. But we're also going to add to our lead in Congress, because we're going to use this tax situation against the people in liberal states, against the Congress people and senators in the liberal states that are running for re-election, on the premise that if you elect a Republican to this state, instead of re-electing a Democrat, we're going to work to get the tax bill down. We're going to work to get the problems that you have with the income tax and the high income tax, like in New York and Illinois and California, we're going to bring that down. So it's not only going to help nationally, but it's going to help the state houses. It's going to help the courthouses. It's going to help Republicans take control of more and more places and jurisdictions throughout the country. It is awesome. Brilliant strategy by the Trump administration, and finally, Congress has gotten on board. Now, if we can only work on Obamacare, because when Paul said, "In whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content," I'm not sure, but I think he kind of forgot about the whole political thing, because it can always be better. Am I right? One side note, and then I'll let you go. Before they passed this tax cut, you heard people like Pocahontas and Chuck Schumer and all of these bigwig liberals talking about, well, we can't pass the tax cuts. We have to have more money rolling into Congress and more money rolling into Washington, because what about the $22 trillion deficit that our country is running? We have to figure out some way of paying that off, and we can't do that with less money. When have you ever heard a Democrat talking about the huge deficit that they are running? They don't talk about that when they're giving out Obama phones or making the food stamp program bigger or adding to welfare. They don't talk about any of that, except when it comes to tax cuts. Why? Because Democrats want, and they've got a knack for keeping people under their thumb. They want to keep control of their voters. They want to lock in solid voting blocks. And they can only do that in one way, and that's to keep everybody on welfare, because these people on welfare know that that's the Democrats. Oh, thank you, Mr. Schumer. Thank you for doing that for us. Thank you, Mrs. Pocahontas Warren. Thank you for giving us this so we can eat and we don't have to work and go find jobs like respectable human beings. Thank you, Democrats. But they never talk about the deficit when they're working on welfare programs because they want to keep the American people, or as many of them as they can, under their thumb and under their control. No longer. Trump is back in town, ladies and gentlemen. The sun is shining bright. There are birds that are singing. It's a good day to be an American. You're listening to the Narrow Way Podcast, episode 18 and a half. We'll talk to you on Monday.